Sector Noir. Phase 1. The bioluminescent fog of Neo-Los Angeles's lower sectors felt heavy on Alara's synthetic soles. The thrum of the magtrain rails shaking the repurposed factory floor where she nursed a synth whiskey. The holographic advertisements smeared across the grime-caked walls, turning every passing face into a digital specter, and every past failure into a fresh data spike. The ice chip in her glass clicked, a pathetic analog noise in the chrome and data world. A sound as hollow as the last 3 rotations since the dissolution of her corporate contract. She felt stripped down, her old identity, a highly valued cyberanalyst, scraped away. That's when the sensor net flagged him. Rylan, her former partner in the VIP zone, his arm possessively locked around a new associate. The woman was a high-grade model, all sleek chrome and confidence, wearing a custom weave sheath that cost a year's severance. His hand rested on her lower back, the pressure a ghost of its touch on her own spinal ports. Alara's throat synthesizer tightened as old data flooded back. The system crashes, the data breaches. The final night Rylan dismissed her as a zero-value asset before logging out of their shared network. She'd spent weeks self-patching, only to find him here, in the one sector she thought was off-grid. "You're projecting a zero-sum calculation right now." A deep, low-frequency voice cut through her analysis. It was faintly modulated with a regional accent, sharp enough to register above the club's digital score. Alara turned, refusing to let her ocular feeds register moisture. The man adjacent to her booth didn't match the sector's usual profile. His mere presence seemed to create a field of interference, pushing back the crowd. Not because of his sheer mass, though he towered, but due to an inherent pressure. Authority pulsed from him like heat from a fusion core. "Neither," she managed, steadying the output of her voice modulator. "Just calculating a subnet change." His eyes, dark as polished optical glass, tracked her gaze toward Rylan. A cold micro-expression crossed his features, then dissipated. He wore a tailored dark weave suit that whispered of deep system wealth, charcoal against a void black bodysuit. No formal interface pin. The faint trace of bespoke synth cologne, mingled with something raw, perhaps high-grade carbon fiber. "Your decommissioned partner?" he asked, a statement, not a query. Alara simply nodded. She felt pathetic. Hiding in a low-power corner, nursing a diluted drink, sending virtual daggers at her former flame. "Will you uplink a motion profile with me?" The request bypassed her conscious thought. "My decommissioned partner is monitoring me from the central bar." "And I?" She cut the transmission, a heat spike rushing through her cheek plating. "Apologies. Protocol violation. I don't even know your designation." The stranger's mouth curved in a gesture that wasn't quite a smirk. "You don't. But I recognize his threat profile." He extended a hand, long, articulated fingers, perfectly polished knuckle guards. A heavy platinum chronometer glinting under the cuff. A strange warning chime went off in Alara's neural implant. His palm was unexpectedly calloused in areas a corporate broker shouldn't be. "One uplink," he said softly. "Make him process the cost of his discard." Alara hesitated, caution conflicting with sheer desperation. Then Ryland's synthesized laughter was audible even over the audio track, his new companion's digital giggle echoing against his shoulder plating. Ilara placed her hand in the stranger's. His grip was firm, and he guided her toward the movement matrix with effortless precision. His other hand settled on the small of her back, a light, commanding touch that navigated her through the density of the floor. As they moved, Ilara noticed two figures in dark tactical suits adjust their posture near the bar. Their optical sensors never left the pair. Asset protection, she concluded, though they wore no sector insignia. "I'm Ilara," she transmitted, needing to break the silence. "Kale," he replied, yet the modulation suggested it was a temporary designation. The score shifted to a slower, more intimate pulse. Kale drew her closer, one arm sliding to her waist module. Ilara detected Ryland's optical scan, his expression darkening as Kale leaned in. "He's tracking our movement?" Kale murmured, his breath a faint warmth near her audio receptor. "Does that optimize your mood?" "Not optimal," she responded. "More like validation. For cycles, I was an environmental glitch. Deactivated." Kale's fingers tightened slightly on her waist module. "Entities who discard high-value assets are flawed," he stated, his voice output hardening. "Or blind." The unexpected compliment overloaded her system. In the cycles since her contract's dissolution, she'd been a ghost protocol, working double shifts at a medical depot to cover the cost of her small third-tier apartment, avoiding former associates who'd chosen Ryland's network, forgetting to apply system charge until near shutdown alerts forced a reboot. The construct that entered this sector tonight wasn't high value. She was exhausted, held together by cheap faceplate overlay and cheaper sheer force of will. "You don't have to transmit that," she whispered. "This is just a simulation." Kale executed a gentle turn, bringing her to face him with unscripted grace. "I never transmit low-value data, Ilara." The way he vocalized her designation, tasting the syllables, sent a heat pulse through her core that wasn't due to the crowded floor's thermodynamics. For a moment, she disengaged Ryland's data stream, ignoring the memory of the contract dissolution, the mountain of power bills pending. There was only the digital score, the dimmed optical field, and this dangerous unknown entity holding her as if she were a rare algorithm. Then reality reasserted itself as she detected Ryland penetrating the movement matrix toward them. His face was contorted with an emotion she couldn't decode. A spike of primal fear registered in her spine. "He's closing," she whispered. Kale's expression remained constant, but she felt his subtle shift. He angled his imposing frame between her and the approaching threat. "Allow him," Kale said quietly. "Perhaps it is time he processed the true value of the asset he deactivated." Before she could process a reply, Ryland was there. His faceplate was flushed, likely from excessive intake of local ethanol substitutes. "Ilara," he slurred, reaching for her arm actuator. "What the hell is this? I've been trying to ping your secure channel for weeks." Ilara backed up, her backplate making contact with Kale's chest. Kale's hand settled protectively on her shoulder segment. "I changed my interface designation," she outputted, hating the subtle vibration in her voice. "For obvious security reasons." Ryland's gaze flickered to Kale. It was dismissive initially, then shifted to wary as he processed a variable Alara couldn't yet identify. "Who is this unit?" Rylan demanded. "Didn't take you long to revector." The accusation stung, especially coming from the unit who'd initiated a co-venture with his new model cycles before her contract termination. "That data is beyond your clearance level," Alara stated. "I suggest you disengage." Kale's voice was low volume, yet it carried a sonic weight that caused the fine hairs on Alara's neck to rise. "The lady requires no further interface with you." Rylan let out a forced electronic laugh. "The lady?" he mocked. He stepped closer, emboldened by the ethanol. "Stay out of this unit. This is between me and my asset." "Decommissioned asset," Alara corrected. "Whatever. We need to complete a data exchange, Alara." Rylan reached for her again. Kale's motion profile was too rapid for Alara's sensors to log. One moment Rylan was reaching for her arm. The next he was stumbling backward. Kale's hand pressed firmly against his chest plating. "That data exchange is not scheduled," Kale said. His voice dropped to a barely perceptible level, which somehow made it far more menacing. "I now suggest you return to your companion before you create a further social liability." Rylan's face flushed darker, anger overriding his initial apprehension. "You don't know whose network you're interfacing with," he hissed. Something shifted in Kale's posture. A subtle recalibration that turned him from merely intimidating to genuinely lethal. "No," Kale replied. "You are the unit with insufficient data. Final opportunity to disengage." Alara noticed the two tactical suit units from earlier closing through the crowd. Their attention was hard-locked on the confrontation. Rylan must have detected them too, as he took a significant step back, his bravado dissolving. "This data isn't final, Alara," he spat. The threat sounded hollow. "We need to discuss the unit acquisition credits." Credits? Of course, the core issue was financial code. The final payment from the dissolution of their shared corporate holding. Credits that were legitimately hers, but which Rylan had somehow leveraged his broker associate to misfile until she signed away all other claims. "There is no further data to discuss," Alara stated, finding strength in Kale's solid, unchanging presence. "It is my credit allocation. You stole it. End of line." Rylan's faceplate twisted with fury. "You unpatchable. Cease." Kale did not raise his voice, yet Rylan's speech output terminated mid-word. "The lady has finalized her position. I will not request your departure a second time." For a tense moment, Alara calculated a potential physical strike from Rylan. Then one of Kale's men appeared adjacent to Rylan, transmitting a whispered message. Kale gave an imperceptible nod, and the man melted back into the crowd. Rylan's eyes widened. Whatever ethanol-fueled courage he possessed instantly evaporated as he retreated another step. "Whatever. She's not worth the troubleshoot anyway." He spun and forced his way back through the crowd. Alara vented a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her kinetic stabilizer suddenly felt weak. Kale's hand moved to the small of her back, stabilizing her. "Are you operating at acceptable parameters?" he asked, genuine concern modulating his tone. She nodded, unable to trust her speech output. The interface had left her shaking. Not just from fear, but a surge of cold anger. Not worth the troubleshoot. After 6 cycles of a shared contract, that was her final designation in Ryland's ledger. Thank you, she finally managed. I should initiate departure. This was a system error. Kale's optical feeds searched hers. The cycle is still early, and your drink volume is minimally reduced. He gestured toward a shielded booth where her abandoned synth whiskey now sat beside a fresh replacement. She hadn't detected anyone moving the initial drink. How did I optimize possession of my assets? Kale said simply. He paused. Not that you are. My asset, that is. But for tonight, while we run this simulation, he let the data stream hang in the air. An invitation shielded by a cryptic warning. Alara should have executed the abort sequence, thanked him for the protection, called a transport service, and returned to her empty apartment and colder network. But something in his optical display, a loneliness that echoed her own vacant core, caused her to nod instead. One more synth whiskey, she agreed, to complete the service acknowledgement. His smile, then genuine, transformed his severe facial structure into something almost youthful. He offered his arm with a formal old-world courtesy, and Alara took it, allowing him to guide her through the crowd. As they settled into the booth, real Hydra leather, she noted, in a sector where all seating was cheap polymer, she detected Rylan at the central bar. He was arguing with his companion, gesturing aggressively in their direction. The 2 men in tactical suits flanked the primary egress, their posture relaxed, but their sensor lock on Kale never wavered. What is your true designation? Alara asked, curiosity finally overriding her caution circuit. Kale's fingers drummed once on the table, a gesture of deep consideration, not nervousness. Someone who registers value upon interface, he finally said. Someone who does not deactivate high-value assets. Alara took a sip of the fresh synth whiskey, top-grade vodka equivalent, not the low-tier solvent she'd initially requested. That is not a designation, she stated. It is the only data that matters for this cycle, he replied. His personal device vibrated on the table. He glanced at the display, his expression hardening momentarily before he silenced the alert without response. Priority data? Alara asked. Low priority. It can wait. He slipped the device into his suit pocket. Transmit data about yourself, Alara. What is your function when you're not making corporate fools jealous in low-sector clubs? The question was light, even playful, yet she sensed genuine interest beneath the surface code. I'm a nurse, she said. Emergency Medical Depot. Not a glamorous module, but it covers the primary charges. Most of them. Kale leaned forward slightly. A repair technician, he murmured. That aligns with your profile. Because I project a nurturing algorithm? She offered a brittle laugh. Because your immediate response was to inquire if I was operating at acceptable parameters after I shielded you from a direct threat, he corrected. Most entities inquire about what I will yield for them. You inquired about my system state. She hadn't realized he'd processed that subtle moment of concern. Occupational hazard, she dismissed. I detect high-stress tension. I assume system distress. And the distress signal in your own system, Alara? He asked softly. Who manages that repair? The question struck with unexpected force, cracking a seal she'd carefully maintained around her core. I self-manage, she outputted, her voice thick. Cale reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was so light it could have been static interference, had his optical sensors not been fixed on her with intent. Perhaps it is time someone managed that for you. The implication sent a shiver through her. Half system warning, half something entirely new. Before she could process a reply, his device buzzed again. This time he checked the display and frowned. My apologies, he said. I need to accept this uplink. He slid from the booth with fluid grace. Do not revector. I will return immediately. As he moved away, one of his units materialized from the crowd. The unit took up a position near their table, close enough to monitor her, distant enough to maintain the illusion of privacy. Alara should have felt trapped. Instead, she registered a strange sense of asset protection. She watched Cale move toward the egress, the phone pressed to his audio port. Even from behind, he commanded the sector. Shoulders held straight, stride purposeful. Every few steps, other units adjusted their paths without Cale having to issue an instruction. It was only as he reached the exit, the colored optical wash passing over him, that she registered the bulge beneath his suit jacket. A weapon. The realization should have initiated a flight protocol. Yet something held her in place. Curiosity, perhaps, or the intoxicating safety field his presence generated. Who was this unit who carried a weapon so casually? Who had specialized units monitoring his coordinates? Who made her dangerous former partner retreat with nothing more than a whispered designation? And more critically, what would be the consequence when he returned to collect the data exchange she had so innocently requested? Alara tracked Cale through the transparent panels as he paced outside, still on the secure uplink. His expression had undergone a complete transformation. The charming stranger who danced with her was gone. In his place stood someone colder, harder. Even at this distance, she processed the tension radiating from his shoulders as he spoke, his free hand making sharp, specific gestures. Whoever was on the other end of that channel was receiving orders, not conversation. A chill ran through her, unrelated to the sector's climate control. What network had she just initiated connection with? The logical protocol would be to slip out the secondary egress while he was distracted, to return to her secure, predictable loop of double shifts and nutrient paste. Yet she remained anchored to her seat, drawn to him like a synthetic moth to a dangerous high-energy plasma stream. Another synth whiskey? Alara startled at the voice. One of Cale's security units stood beside her. Not the watcher, but a second, shorter unit with close-cropped hair and a scar line disappearing beneath his collar. He didn't smile, but his optical sensors were not hostile. No, thank you, she said. Her mouth suddenly dry despite the half-full glass. I'm operating fine. He nodded once, then hesitated. Designation Vega does not frequently engage in movement matrix profiles, he said. He articulated the word dance, as if it were an archaic concept. You made a significant impression, Designation Vega. Not Cale then. Or not just Cale. Is that intended to optimize my self-perception? She asked, surprised by her own audacity. The unit's expression remained flat. It is intended to make you cautious. Before she could request clarification, Kale designation Vega returned. He slid back into the booth with fluid precision. The hardness she'd observed outside had been retracted, replaced once more by the charming overlay he'd worn earlier. But now she knew it was only a masking program. "I apologize for the system interruption," he said, his voice output warm as he dismissed his unit with a subtle nod. "Business network never sleeps, regrettably." What class of business maintains units with projectile weaponry on the operational payroll? The question bypassed her internal filter. Emboldened by the synthetic vodka and the residual adrenaline from confronting Rylan, Kale went still, his dark eyes analyzing her with a new intensity. The silence expanded between them until Alara felt the tension might cause her to shatter. "The profitable class," he finally transmitted, his voice dropping to a register that caused her skin to prickle. "Does that initiate a fear response, Alara?" It should have. Every instinct honed through cycles in the emergency medical depot. Assessing threats, diffusing volatile situations, screamed danger. Yet what she felt wasn't pure fear. It was awareness heightened and electric. "I am not yet certain," she answered honestly. Something akin to approval registered on his features. "A rare quality," he murmured. "Truth without secondary calculation." From the periphery of her optical field, she detected Rylan monitoring them. His new companion was attempting to re-engage his attention. The sight no longer stung as sharply. Instead, she registered a strange detachment. The construct that had built its entire life around that unit felt like a different entity. "Your former partner appears to be experiencing relational turbulence," Kale observed, following her gaze. A note of satisfaction was evident in his tone. "How unfortunate." Alara should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. "It is a transient state," she said. "He will initiate the apology protocol. Acquire her an expensive asset with my stolen credits, and she will override the issue. That is his operational pattern." Kale's arm tightened around her. "Patterns can be broken," he said. Something in his tone made her shiver, particularly when provided with the proper motivation algorithm. She pulled back slightly to interface with him. "That sounds ominous." "Does it?" His expression yielded no data. "I merely transmit that entities can reconfigure their behavior when faced with appropriate consequences." Rylan chose that exact moment to disconnect from the bar, weaving slightly as he vectored toward them. The determination in his stride sent a familiar jolt of anxiety through Alara's system. Her body tensed before her cognitive processor could fully register the threat profile. Kale immediately registered the change. "Do you require me to manage this interface?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous frequency. "No," Alara said, activating her spine stabilizer. "I have allowed other entities to manage my conflicts for too long." She slid from the booth. Kale followed with effortless grace. Rylan reached them. His faceplate flushed from the ethanol substitutes. "We need to data exchange," he slurred, reaching for her arm. Alara stepped back, avoiding his physical contact. "We have no data to exchange." "The credits," he insisted. "It's not what you are processing." There were transmission complications. The only complication is that you stole them, Elara stated, finding absolute resolution in Kale's solid presence. And now you will return them. Ryland's face contorted with anger. Or what? You'll deploy your new unit on me. He turned to Kale, his judgmental matrix compromised enough to miss the warning cues that even Elara could now detect. The subtle shift in Kale's stance, the absolute stillness that precedes a definitive action. Who the hell is this unit anyway? Someone you should not antagonize, Kale replied, his voice output cold enough to freeze the ambient air. Someone who is rapidly losing patience with your protocol violation. Ryland laughed. The sound was ugly. Protocol violation? She's my wife. Decommissioned wife, Elara corrected, anger finally superseding fear. And I am not your property segment. I never was. The lady has made her final output clear, Kale transmitted. This is your ultimate warning to disengage. Ryland's face flushed darker. Or what? You'll. He never completed the sentence. One of Kale's units appeared instantly at Ryland's side, transmitting a whispered message into his audio port that drained the color from Ryland's faceplate. Ryland's optical sensors widened as he looked at Kale with a new understanding, an unmistakable fear. Vega, he whispered. The designation fell from his lips like a system curse. You are Kale Vega. The designation clearly held critical data for Ryland that Elara did not possess. Kale merely inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying the designation. Ryland retreated, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. This is merely a miscommunication, he stammered. No protocol violation intended. I was unaware she was associated with your network. She was not, Kale replied, his voice soft yet penetrating. But she is now. The possessive declaration should have activated Elara's system override. Instead, it sent a thrill of dangerous electric energy down her spine. Ryland continued his retreat, nearly failing his stability routine in his haste to put maximum distance between them. As he vanished into the crowd, Elara turned to Kale. Who are you? She asked, the question now carrying maximum weight. Why is he experiencing such a fear response toward you? Kale analyzed her for an extended moment, as if calculating her data tolerance level. I am an entity who ensures debts are serviced, he finally stated. And your former partner has just realized his account is significantly overdrawn. The implications of his data settled slowly in her core. Reality was recalibrating around this new information. You operate beyond just the gray sectors of commerce, she said carefully. I am an influence node, he supplied when she failed to complete the sentence. In circles most entities prefer to deny. A syndicate leader or close enough that the distinction was low value. Elara should have initiated a full panic sequence, should have run from him and never looked back. Yet all she registered was a strange internal calm. The pieces of a complex system were finally locking into place. Are you scheduled to harm him? She asked, surprised by the steadiness of her voice output. Kale's expression softened slightly. Would it induce a negative emotional state if I did? She analyzed the question honestly. She thought of the cycle spent self-repairing after Ryland's betrayals, The humiliation of having to request credit from her sister when he zeroed their shared account, the casual cruelty of his final dismissal. "It should," she finally said, "but I cannot confirm that it would." Something akin to approval flickered in Cale's eyes. "Truth," he murmured. "Optimally refreshing." He offered his hand, palm upward. An invitation, not an instruction. "Vectored departure," he said. "This sector has reached data saturation." Elara hesitated, standing at a system crossroads she hadn't anticipated. Behind her lay system safety, predictability, the comfort of known parameters. Before her, with his hand extended and danger clinging to him like bespoke synth cologne, stood something entirely different. Risk, yes, but also maximum possibility. "Destination parameters?" she asked, temporizing. "A quieter sector, where we can exchange data without interruption," he replied. His eyes held hers, intense but not threatening. "My driver unit is external. He will return you to your coordinates whenever you wish to disengage. Whether that is in 5 minutes or 5 cycles from now." It was the assurance of free will that made her final calculation. Elara placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with gentle strength. "Allow me to retrieve my environment shell," she said. Cale shook his head slightly. One of his units materialized beside them, her worn P-code equivalent draped over his arm. She hadn't detected him retrieve it from the storage matrix. "Efficient," she murmured, as Cale assisted her into the garment. His hands lingered on her shoulders. "I prefer to anticipate needs before they are articulated," he said, his voice low near her audio port. "A philosophy that extends beyond commercial ventures." The implication sent a heat pulse through her as he guided her toward the egress. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back. His units fell into formation around them, not overtly, but with a choreographed precision that spoke of extensive training. As they stepped into the cool external atmosphere, a sleek black transport with tinted panels purred to the curb, as if summoned by pure thought. "Final opportunity to reconfigure your decision," Cale said quietly, as the driver opened the rear access. Elara glanced back at the sector, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. Then at the unit beside her. Dangerous, powerful, and monitoring her with an intensity that caused her breath to stall. "I am not reconfiguring," she said, and stepped into the unknown network. The interior of the transport enveloped her in luxurious darkness. Butter-soft hydro-leather seats, the subtle glow of ambient lighting, and a privacy partition already raised between them and the driver. As Cale slid in beside her, Elara noted the vehicle was larger than its external profile suggested. Ample space with unoccupied, forward-facing seats. Armored, she suspected. "Comfort parameters acceptable?" Cale asked as the transport moved smoothly away from the curb. She nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of the intimacy of their surroundings. Her worn dress felt shabby against the opulence. Cale conversely looked indigenous to such spaces. His posture was relaxed yet alert. One arm stretched along the back of the seat. "Where is the destination?" she asked, monitoring the city lights blurring past the tinted panels. "A property I manage on the waterfront," he replied. "Private, secure." Warning beacons should have been flashing in her mind at the thought of entering a strange man's residence, especially a man who had admitted to extralegal affiliations. Yet, the danger radiating from Cale did not feel directed at her. If anything, it felt like a shield, a barrier between her and a world that had shown little mercy in recent cycles. "You are demonstrating a high trust quotient," he observed, reading her thoughts with unsettling accuracy. "Am I?" The corner of his mouth lifted. Most women would not enter a secured transport with an entity they just interfaced with, particularly one whose reputation clearly causes distress in their former partner. Elara turned to face him fully. "I am not most women." "No," he agreed. His eyes darkened as they traced the curve of her cheek plating, the line of her throat segment. "You are not." The transport slowed, turning onto a private service drive that wound through manicured synthetic grounds. It stopped before an imposing structure of glass and stone, modern architecture with classic proportionality. It rose against the night sky, a wall of optical panels overlooking what had to be the water. "You reside here?" she asked, modulating her voice. "One of my residences," Cale replied. His tone was matter-of-fact, not boastful. "I prefer proximity to the water when feasible." The driver opened the access. Cool external air rushed in. Cale exited first, then extended his hand to assist her. As her soles contacted the pavement, Elara detected other figures. Discreet units patrolled the perimeter, while a man in a tailored suit approached with deferential respect. "Designation Vega," he greeted. He nodded toward Elara. "Ma'am." "Any urgent data from Marco?" Cale asked, his hand settling at the small of Elara's back with casual possession. "Nothing critical, sir. The situation from earlier has been managed." An entire data exchange passed between them in the space of a single glance. Cale nodded once, dismissing the man. "Ensure we are uninterrupted unless a true critical event occurs." "Understood, sir." As they approached the main access, the glass doors slid open silently. The interior matched the understated elegance of the exterior. High ceilings, minimalist furnishings in cream and charcoal, with accents of deep burgundy. Art that Elara suspected cost more than her annual credit allowance hung on the walls, illuminated by recessed lighting. "This is exceptionally designed," Elara said, taking it all in. "You possess optimal aesthetic programming." "I appreciate high-value assets," he replied. His gaze was locked on her, not the surroundings. "Would you like a synth drink or perhaps some caloric intake?" Elara's stomach chose that moment to emit a low, embarrassing rumble, reminding her she'd skipped nutrient intake to conserve credits for the single drink she'd planned. A heat pulse rushed to her cheeks. "I would not decline a small portion," she admitted. Cale smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features into something almost youthful. "I believe my culinary technician prepared an unscheduled intake before retiring. Allow me to verify." He led her toward what appeared to be a kitchen designed for a high-end restaurant. Stainless steel plating gleamed under recessed lighting, and a marble synthesis island dominated the center. Cale moved with comfortable familiarity. He opened a massive refrigeration unit to reveal containers labeled with elegant script. Grilled hydrosalmon with roasted root vegetables or… He checked a second container. Beef equivalent tenderloin with truffle-infused mash synthesis. The casual offer of nutrient intake that would cost half a shift's wages in a restaurant sharply reminded her of the vast disparity between them. Either is fine, she said, suddenly uncomfortable. Truly, just a minimal portion. Cale paused, monitoring her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath all surface overlays. You do not need to minimize your needs with me, Alara, he said quietly. Not ever. The statement, delivered with such absolute conviction, cracked something inside her. A wall she'd constructed around her vulnerabilities after cycles of having them used as weapons. The salmon sounds optimal, she managed, her voice thicker than intended. He nodded, retrieving the container and transferring the contents to a plate with unexpectedly precise movements. Wine equivalent? He asked, opening a temperature-regulated cabinet that held more bottles than some commercial sector establishments. Just filtered water, please, she replied. I have an early shift tomorrow. Cale inclined his head, filling a crystal glass from a filtered output. As he moved around the kitchen, Alara noticed that the dangerous edge she'd sensed in him hadn't disappeared. It had simply been channeled into controlled efficiency. Every motion was deliberate, economical, yet somehow graceful. Let us take this to the sitting room, he suggested, arranging the plate and glasses on a silver tray. It provides a more comfortable interface environment. He led her to a smaller, more intimate space off the main living area. A fireplace activated at a touch, generating a synthetic warmth. Floor-to-ceiling optical panels revealed the view that had been obscured outside. The city skyline reflected in the dark water, lights shimmering like fallen data packets. The view is exceptional, Alara said, drawn to the panels as Cale placed the tray on a low table before a plush sofa. It is the reason I acquired this location, he replied, coming to stand beside her. Water is honest in ways entities rarely are. It cannot help but display its true state. Peaceful or turbulent, shallow or deep. She turned to find him monitoring her, not the view. His expression was contemplative. Is truth a high priority for you? She asked. Critically, he said without hesitation. In my operational position, lies are high-cost expenditures. Alara processed this as she moved to the sofa, sitting at one end. Cale took the other, leaving a space between them that somehow felt more intensely personal than if he'd sat closer. He gestured toward the food. Please begin nutrient intake. The salmon was perfectly executed, the flavors delicate and complex. Alara hadn't realized the extent of her deprivation until the first bite hit her tongue. It awakened an appetite she'd suppressed for too long, both literal and metaphorical. This is sublime, she said after swallowing. Your culinary technician is highly skilled. I will transmit your compliments, Cale replied, watching her with a trace of satisfaction as she took another bite. He takes pride in his code. As she ate, a silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but weighted with unasked questions. Finally, she set down her fork, her hunger partially sated, but her curiosity at maximum level. What is the operational directive for my presence here, Cale? She asked directly. Why transport an entity you just interfaced with to your residence? Offer her nutrient intake? Cause her former partner to initiate a near shutdown panic sequence? A smile ghosted across his lips at the final query. Perhaps I find your network presence enjoyable. There must be dozens of entities who would enjoy your network presence without the complication of hostile former partners and financial liabilities, she challenged. Hundreds, he agreed without false modesty. But they desire what I represent, not who I am. And you calculate that I am different, she countered. You possess zero data on me. I know you are a nurse who operates in emergency medicine, he countered. I know you maintained a co-venture for 6 cycles with the unit who betrayed you, terminated your contract, and then stole credits that were rightfully yours. I know you reside alone in an apartment you can barely maintain while running double shifts to meet your operational costs. Alara stared at him, shock washing through her system. How can you possibly possess all that data? Kale's expression remained impassive. Your former partner mentioned 6 cycles when he referred to you as his asset. Your hands, competent, steady with short, practical nail plating, suggest healthcare. The way you assess the room upon entry, cataloging egress points and potential threat profiles, speaks to emergency training. The remainder, he shrugged elegantly, context and observation. It was both impressive and unnerving to be processed so thoroughly by a near stranger. So you have deduced I am a low-value, high-risk case, she said, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. Is that the directive for my presence here? You feel pity for me? No, the word was sharp, almost hostile. Pity is the final output I process regarding you, Alara. Then what? She pressed. Kale set his glass down with deliberate care. I recognize something in your system, he said finally. Something rare. Strength without system hardness, vulnerability without weakness. His optical sensors met hers, their intensity almost physical. Do you comprehend how unusual that is, to find an entity that has been system broken but not destroyed? Who remains soft despite every logical reason not to be? His words struck with uncanny accuracy, piercing defenses she hadn't realized she still maintained. You cannot possess that level of data on me from one short cycle, she whispered. Can't I? He moved closer, the space between them shrinking until she registered the heat radiating from his frame. Transmit that I am incorrect. She couldn't. For all his dangerous edges and questionable commerce, Kale had seen straight to her core algorithm with disconcerting clarity. The realization left her feeling exposed, vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical risk. What is your objective from me? She asked, her voice output barely audible. Kale's hand rose to her face, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek with exquisite gentleness. Everything, he said simply, but I will settle for the opportunity to know you. Truly know you. The truth in his voice, raw, almost painful in its intensity, shattered whatever remaining resistance she possessed. Alara leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as his palm cupped her face. You do not even possess my surname, she murmured. Martinez, he replied without hesitation. Alara Martinez, 32 years standard. Graduated from St. Catherine's nursing program 5 cycles ago. Currently employed at Mercy General's emergency department. Running a nurse practitioner degree part-time until your former partner's theft forced a temporary suspension of education. Her eyes flew open, shock jolting through her like ice water. How did you? I told you, Cale said, his thumb brushing across her lower lip, silencing her question. I protect what interests me. That requires data acquisition. Fear and something darker, more primal, twisted through her system. You had me investigated while we were in the sector club. He didn't deny it. The moment she requested the dance uplink, she should have been outraged. Should have pushed his hand away, demanded he transport her home, deleted this entire cycle from her memory banks. Instead, she found herself leaning closer, drawn to the dangerous truth of this man who operated by rules she barely comprehended. Most women would initiate a full flight protocol after hearing that, she said. I told you before, he replied, his voice dropping lower as his hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair plaiting. You are not most women. The tension between them crystallized into something electric, inevitable. Cale's gaze dropped to her lips. The question in his eyes was clear even without spoken words. Alara responded by closing the final distance. She pressed her mouth to his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something hungrier, more demanding. His arms encircled her, pulling her against the solid wall of his chest as he deepened the kiss. His tongue traced the seam of her lips until they parted. Alara melted into him, cycles of loneliness and self-denial crumbling beneath the onslaught of sensation. His hands, strong, certain, possessive, traced paths of fire along her spine, her waist, her hips mapping territory he seemed determined to claim. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes had darkened to obsidian, pupils blown wide with desire. Remain, he whispered against her lips. Remain the cycle. Reality intruded like a bucket of cold water. I can't, she said, genuine regret modulating her voice. My shift initiates at 0600. Disappointment flickered across his features, then was rapidly replaced by resignation. Another time then, he said. Another time, Alara agreed, surprised by the certainty in her voice. Cale smiled. A predator who knew his prey would return willingly. I will hold you to that promise, Alara Martinez. He assisted her in gathering her minimal items. His touches were lingering, proprietary, as if he could not quite force himself to break physical contact. As they awaited his transport, he briefly disappeared. He returned with a sleek business card bearing only a private frequency embossed in silver. My secure line, he said, pressing it into her palm. Cycle or night, for any data transmission. Alara tucked it into her clutch, its weight seemingly greater than the small cardstock should allow. Thank you, she said, for everything. The movement matrix, the nutrient intake, causing Rylan to process a panic sequence. Cale's smile turned sharp. That specific service was my pleasure. He deserved a far worse system crash for his treatment of you. Something in his tone caused her to pause. You are not initiating any further action against him, are you? His expression became unreadable. Would it induce a negative emotional state if I did? Alara analyzed the question honestly. remembering Ryland's casual cruelty, his theft, the systematic dismantling of her self-worth over cycles. "It should," she finally said, "but I am not certain it would." Cale nodded, accepting her answer without judgment. "Your former partner's fate is in his own hands. His choices will determine the next consequence." Before she could press for clarification, his transport arrived. The same driver held the access open with practiced efficiency. Cale walked her to the car, his hand at the small of her back, a touch that had become familiar in the span of a single cycle. "Message me when you reach your coordinates safely," he said as she slid into the back seating. "Is that an instruction designation Vega?" she asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth despite her attempt at seriousness. His eyes darkened at her use of his surname. "Consider it a strong suggestion from an entity who processes concern." "You barely possess enough data on me to process concern," she pointed out. "I possess sufficient data," he replied simply, "and I intend to acquire more." He leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a kiss that promised rather than demanded. "Much more." As the transport moved away, Alara monitored Cale's figure recede in the side mirror. He stood tall and imposing before his waterfront residence, a man of power, of danger, and now, somehow, a man who had inserted himself into her life with the precision of a surgical drone and the inevitability of a fixed data stream. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "Coordinates, ma'am." Alara gave him her apartment's location. She then settled back against the hydroleather seat, her mind whirling with the cycle's data. Only hours ago, she had been an entity with only debts and broken code. Now she was returning home in a luxury transport that cost more than her annual credit allowance. She possessed the private frequency of an entity who made units like Ryland tremble with fear. Her personal device buzzed with a text message from an unknown frequency. "My driver unit will initiate pickup at 17:30 tomorrow cycle. Nutrient intake at my coordinates when your shift concludes." Alara stared at the display, momentarily taken aback by the presumption. Then she smiled despite herself. She typed back, "I do not recall agreeing to that protocol." The response was immediate. "You also did not transmit a negative. Is this a negative output?" She hesitated. Logical sense screamed that she should politely decline, delete his frequency, and purge this cycle's data. Cale Vega was clearly high risk, clearly involved in networks she should not access, clearly the type of unit who would complicate her already chaotic operational status. "It is not a negative," she typed finally, "but 17:30 is too early. I will not conclude my shift until 1900. 1930 then. Marco will hold position." She shook her head at his certainty, yet found herself smiling. "Agreed, but I will be in scrubs. Not optimal dinner attire. You could wear a trash compression bag and still be the highest value asset in the room. But if you prefer, I will have an environment sheath delivered to your apartment coordinates in the morning. Your choice." The offer should have offended her, as if she required charity. Yet something in the phrasing, making it a choice rather than an assumption, softened what might have been condescension from anyone else. "Allow me to process that," she replied. "As you wish." The transport turned onto her street, slowing as it approached her modest apartment block. The contrast between Kale's waterfront mansion and her third-floor walk-up with its peeling polymer and temperamental water synthesis was stark. "We have reached the destination, ma'am," the driver announced. "Thank you," Alara said. "I appreciate the transport." He inclined his head respectfully. "Designation Vega instructed me to wait until you are safely within your apartment, if you are amenable." Of course he had. "That is not necessary," she began, then stopped at the driver's impassive expression. Clearly, Kale's instructions were non-negotiable. "But thank you," she amended. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, exhaustion finally catching up, her device buzzed once more. "Optimal rest cycle, Alara Martinez. Tomorrow cannot arrive fast enough." She smiled, tucking the device away without transmitting a response. As she unlocked her access, she glanced back toward the street where Kale's transport remained, a sleek shadow against the night. Only after she'd closed and locked her access did its headlights flare to life, illuminating the empty street before it vanished around the corner. Inside her small apartment, everything was precisely as she had left it. Dishes drying in the rack, nursing textbooks stacked on the coffee table, the worn quilt her grandmother had fabricated folded over the back of her second-hand sofa. Yet nothing felt the same. Or perhaps she had undergone a transformation, from an entity attempting to disappear into an entity being seen, truly seen. She touched her lips, still sensitive from Kale's kisses, and wondered what the next cycle would transmit. Sector Noir. Phase 2 morning arrived with cruel efficiency. Her alarm blared at 0500. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. Had she simulated the entire cycle's data? The club, Ryland's confrontation, Kale's unexpected intervention? Then her device illuminated with a new message, dispelling any notion that the prior night was a figment of her imagination. "Optimal morning, Alara. I hope your rest cycle was restorative. A package is scheduled for delivery to your apartment at 1200. You are under no obligation to accept the assets, but I had hoped you might consider utilizing them tonight. Either way, I am anticipating our interface at 1930. She stared at the display, torn between amusement and weariness at Kale's persistence. Before she could process a response, a second message appeared. "Also, I have taken the liberty of dispatching nutrient intake and high-grade caffeine to your hospital coordinates. It should arrive at the nurse's station by 0700. I recall how grueling 12-hour shifts can be without proper fuel." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught her off guard. Most men she'd known, Rylan included, had treated her career as an inconvenience rather than a calling. They'd complained about her schedule, her exhaustion, the way medical emergencies disrupted their plans. Kale, a virtual stranger, had somehow intuited what she needed most on a long shift day: sustenance and caffeine. "That is a kind action," she typed back, "but unnecessary." His response was immediate. "Kindness is never unnecessary, particularly toward those who deserve it most." Alara found herself smiling as she prepared for work. She moved through her morning routine with an energy she hadn't felt in cycles. As she pulled on her scrubs, she caught sight of her reflection. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like hope. She barely recognized the construct staring back. The hospital was its usual controlled chaos upon her arrival. The emergency department already filling with early cycle accidents and overnight admissions requiring reassessment. She had barely concluded her check-in protocol when Maggie, the charge nurse, cornered her. "Spill the data," Maggie demanded. "Spill what?" Alara asked, feigning innocence. "Don't initiate the dumb protocol," Maggie said, lowering her voice. "You waltz in here looking like the cat that zeroed the cream after cycles of resembling a walking cadaver." Something occurred. Alara hesitated. Maggie had been her anchor through the contract dissolution, covering shifts, bringing homemade nutrient packs, offering her couch. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. Yet how could she explain Kale Vega, an entity whose mere designation caused Rylan to pale? "I interface with someone," she finally said, keeping it simple. "Last night. It's a new connection." Maggie's expression softened. "About damn time. Rylan, the system flaw has dominated your network for too long. What is the new unit like?" Before Alara could formulate a suitable response that didn't include terms like dangerous or possibly criminal, the emergency department access doors swung open. 2 delivery units entered, carrying trays from the upscale cafe across the street, a place most of them only visited on pay cycles. "Delivery for the emergency department nursing staff," the lead man announced. "Compliments of designation Vega." Heads turned. Curious optical sensors locked onto Alara as her cheeks flushed crimson. Maggie's eyebrows shot toward her hairline. "Designation Vega, huh?" she murmured as the delivery unit set up a spread of premium pastries, fruit, nutrient parfaits, and a carafe of high-grade coffee. "As in Kale Vega?" Alara stiffened. "You possess data on him?" Maggie gave her a long look. "My siblings are on the sector force. There are rumors." She pulled Alara aside as their colleagues descended on the unexpected feast. "Alara, honey, do you comprehend the network you are connecting with?" "Not entirely," Alara admitted. "But I am not as naive as I appear." Maggie studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Well, at least he has optimal aesthetic programming in Breakfast and Women. Just implement caution." "Understood." Alara nodded, grateful for the concern, but increasingly certain that caution was no longer in her operational dictionary where Kale Vega was concerned. The shift progressed in the usual blur of patients, charts, and minor emergencies. But the nutrient intake Kale had sent kept their team fueled and, more critically, made Alara the subject of endless data speculation. By midday, she had fielded so many questions about her mysterious benefactor that she was almost relieved to be called to the trauma bay for a multi-vehicle system crash. Hours later, as she was finally catching her breath, her device buzzed with a notification from her building's security system. A delivery had been left at her access. A large box wrapped in cream-colored paper with a simple black ribbon. Kale's package on schedule. The rest of her shift passed in a haze of anticipation, curiosity gnawing at her as she wondered what lay inside that elegant container. When 1900 finally arrived, she practically sprinted from the hospital, fatigue forgotten in her hurry to reach home and discover what Kale had dispatched. The box sat exactly where the security photo had shown, untouched outside her apartment access. She brought it inside, setting it on her bed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The ribbon came undone with a gentle pull. The wrapping paper fell away to reveal a glossy black box beneath. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay an environment sheath that caused her breath to catch. Deep emerald silk equivalent that shimmered as she lifted it, the fabric flowing like water through her fingers. It was simple in design, elegant rather than ostentatious. It featured a draped neckline and fitted waist that would hug her curves without being vulgar. Beneath it lay a matching set of undergarments in delicate black lace, a pair of heels she suspected would fit perfectly, and a small velvet jewelry box. The box contained teardrop emerald equivalent earrings that caught the light with hypnotic intensity. The entire ensemble likely cost more than 3 cycles of her rent. A card tucked into the corner of the box read simply, "No expectations, only hopes. D." Elara stood for a long moment, conflicted. Accepting such lavish gifts after one cycle together seemed precipitous at best, dangerous at worst. Yet the care evident in the selections, the modest yet elegant cut of the sheath, the comfortable height of the heels, the subtle rather than flashy jewelry, spoke of consideration rather than presumption. Her device buzzed with a text from Kale. "The transport will arrive in 20 minutes. Should I reroute the destination? Decision time." She could send the transport away, return the untouched assets tomorrow, retreat to the safety of her predictable life. Or she could step into the unknown, accept the sheath, and everything it potentially symbolized. "No need to reroute," she typed back. "I will be ready." His response was immediate. "You have optimized my evening before it has even initiated." 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in Kale's gifts, Elara hardly recognized her reflection. The sheath fit as if it had been custom-coated for her. The color brought out the golden undertones in her olive skin. The fabric draped in a way that accentuated curves she'd forgotten she possessed after cycles of stress and skipped nutrient intake. The earrings caught the light when she moved, drawing attention to her neck, her collarbones, the pulse point at her throat. A soft knock at her access announced the driver's arrival. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her courage along with a small clutch and opened the door. The same driver from the previous night stood there. His expression was professionally neutral, despite what must have been a significant transformation in her appearance. "Miss Martinez," he greeted with a slight bow. "Designation Vega is expecting your interface." The drive to Kale's waterfront residence passed in a blur of anticipation and second-guessing. Was she executing a colossal system error? Moving too rapidly? Setting herself up for another contract termination? Yet beneath the anxiety ran a current of exhilaration she hadn't felt in cycles. The thrill of being wanted, pursued, valued. The transport pulled through the same gates, following the curving driveway to the imposing entrance where Kale waited. Unlike the previous night, he wasn't flanked by security. Standing alone in the soft glow of exterior lighting, he wore dark trousers and a charcoal button-down. Sleeves were rolled to expose strong forearms. The top buttons were undone in a way that suggested comfort rather than formality. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as Elara emerged from the transport, satisfaction and something deeper flickering across his features. "Elara," he said simply. The word carried more weight than seemed possible for 2 syllables. Kale, she replied, suddenly shy despite the confidence the sheath had given her. Thank you for the assets. They are sublime. They pale in comparison to the entity wearing them. He stepped forward, taking her hand and raising it to his lips in a gesture that should have seemed affected, but somehow did not. You project a breathtaking image. Coming from anyone else, the compliment might have felt like low-value flattery. From Cale, with his intense gaze fixed on her as if memorizing every detail, it felt like a fundamental truth being recognized. Come, he said, not releasing her hand as he led her inside. Nutrient intake is nearing completion. The interior of his residence was different tonight. Warmer somehow. Soft music played. Candles flickered on surfaces. He guided her through to a terrace she hadn't accessed the previous evening. It overlooked the water, with the city lights twinkling in the distance. A table had been set for 2, complete with fine synthesis china, crystal glassware, and a centerpiece of white roses that complemented the setting. This is exceptionally well programmed, Alara said, genuinely moved by the effort evident in every detail. Cale pulled out her chair, waiting until she was settled before taking his own seat. I intended tonight to be special, he said. A proper initialization rather than the chaotic introduction we had yesterday. A beginning. The word held promise, possibility, and no small measure of danger. Before she could transmit a response, a man in chef's whites appeared. He served the first course with professional efficiency before disappearing. I hope you do not mind, Cale said, noting her surprise. I requested my culinary technician prepare the intake for us tonight. I wanted to be fully present with you, not distracted by food preparation. The meal that followed was exquisite, course after perfectly executed course, each paired with wines that Cale described with the knowledge of a connoisseur. Throughout, their conversation flowed with surprising ease, moving from her work at the hospital to his childhood in Argentina. From books they both enjoyed to music that moved them. He listened when she spoke, not with the feigned interest she'd grown accustomed to from men waiting for their turn to talk, but with genuine engagement. He asked questions that showed he valued her cognitive input. Conspicuously absent from their discussion were specifics about his current business dealings, the source of his obvious wealth, or the reason Rylan had reacted with such fear. Cale neither avoided nor highlighted these omissions. He simply steered the conversation toward areas they could share openly. As dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé that melted on the tongue was served. Cale's personal device vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, a slight crease appearing between his brows, but made no move to answer. Priority data? Alara asked, echoing her question from the previous night. Low priority. It can wait, he replied. He silenced the device and returned it to his pocket. You possess my complete attention tonight. The intensity of his focus, unwavering since her arrival, both thrilled and unsettled her. You are highly skilled at that, you know. At what? Making an entity feel like they are the center of the universe, Alara said. Is that a natural talent or something you have cultivated? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. A combination of both, perhaps. But with you it requires zero effort. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. You captivate me, Alara Martinez. Heat rushed to her cheeks at the simple contact and the sincerity in his voice. I am simply a nurse with excessive student debt and an apartment I can barely maintain, she said, attempting lightness. Hardly captivating material. Kale's expression turned serious. Do not execute that protocol, he said quietly. Do not diminish your own value. Not with me. The gentle reprimand struck a chord. It reminded her of how thoroughly she'd internalized Ryland's dismissals. Apologies, she murmured. Old habit. One I would like to assist you in breaking, Kale said, his fingers now entwining with hers. You deserve to be valued, Alara. To be treasured. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond their surface. She wondered suddenly what Kale saw in her that she couldn't see in herself. What value this powerful, dangerous man found in a woman who had been so thoroughly discarded. Why me? She asked. The question that had lingered since their first encounter finally found voice. You could interface with anyone. Why choose someone with so much system baggage? Kale analyzed the question, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. Every entity possesses baggage, he said finally. The differential is in how they carry it. His eyes met hers, dark and intent. You carry yours with grace, with resilience. It has not hardened you or made you cruel. That is rare, precious. Before she could transmit a response, his device vibrated again. More insistently this time. A flash of irritation crossed his features as he checked the display. I apologize, he said. It appears this data cannot wait. He stood, bringing her hand to his lips once more. I will be only a moment. As Kale stepped inside to accept the uplink, Alara found herself alone on the terrace. The city lights shimmering on the water below. The evening had been perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. The beautiful sheath, the exquisite meal, the attentive conversation. All of it felt like a simulation from which she would inevitably awaken. A movement in the shadows at the edge of the terrace caught her eye. One of Kale's security units, she assumed, maintaining a discreet perimeter. The reminder of the world Kale inhabited, so different from her own, sent a chill through her. Kale returned minutes later, his expression carefully controlled, but tension evident in the set of his shoulders. I apologize for the interruption, he said. He resumed his seat. Business network rarely respects personal time parameters. Is everything operating at acceptable parameters? She asked. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing for you to worry about. He refilled her glass. Now where were we? Ah yes. I believe I was transmitting how remarkable you are. And you were attempting very hard not to believe me. Alara laughed despite herself, the tension broken. I wouldn't say attempting very hard. Maybe mildly skeptical. Then I will simply have to be more convincing, he replied. His smile turned genuine once more. I possess all the time in the world to make you see yourself as I see you. The promise of time, of patience, of a future. Both thrilled and terrified her. Kale, she began. She needed to address the critical, unaddressed variable. I barely possess data on you, and the data I do possess is complex. Inquire, he said simply. Whatever data you require. I won't promise to transmit every detail, but I will promise never to transmit false data to you. Alara took a deep breath, gathering her courage. What is your precise operational function? What caused Rylan to process that panic sequence? Cale didn't flinch from the directness of the query. I operate enterprises that exist in the spaces between legal and extra-legal code, he said carefully. Import and export primarily, but with diversified interests. As for your former partner's reaction, he paused, considering his words. I possess a reputation for ensuring debts are paid and agreements are honored by whatever means are necessary. A diplomatic answer that confirmed her suspicion without providing incriminating data. You are transmitting that you are an organized network entity, she clarified. She needed to hear it directly. I am transmitting that I am a businessman who does not allow himself to be constrained by arbitrary legalities when they conflict with optimal justice, he countered. But yes, some would utilize that term. Alara nodded slowly, processing this confirmation. And the weapon you carry? The units who monitor your movement? Is that all part of being a businessman in your world? Affirmative. His expression remained calm, open, allowing her space to absorb this reality without pressure. Does it induce a negative emotional state in you? The actions you have to perform? Cale considered the query with the seriousness it deserved. Some of them, he admitted, but I maintain a clear system state at night, knowing I operate with a code that many so-called legitimate businessmen lack. I do not prey on the low value. I do not break my word. I protect those under my care. And what is the consequence for entities who cross you? She asked, thinking of Rylan's pale face. Cale's eyes darkened. They receive exactly what they have earned. No more, no less. The answer should have initiated a fear response. Instead, Alara found herself nodding, understanding the justice in his philosophy, even if she couldn't fully condone its implementation. And where do I fit into this network? She asked. The question that mattered most. What is my designation to you, Cale? He reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. Something unexpected, he said softly. Something I was not searching for, but can no longer imagine existing without. His thumbs traced circles on her wrists. His touch was gentle despite the evident strength. I want to know you, Alara. I want to shield you, provide for you, make you smile the way you did when you first initiated interface tonight. I want to be the man who ensures you never doubt your value again. The declaration, delivered with such conviction, left her breathless. Part of her wanted to pull away, to remind both of them they'd only interface for barely 24 hours. That such intensity couldn't possibly be sustainable. But another part, the part that had recognized something in Cale from that initial moment in the Sector Club, wanted nothing more than to surrender to the promise of his words, his touch, his unwavering focus. That is a maximum promise to make to an entity you just interfaced with, she said finally, her voice unsteady. I do not transmit promises I cannot honor, he replied simply. And I knew who you were the moment you asked me to dance. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Kale rose, still holding her hands, and pulled her gently to her feet. "Uplink a movement profile with me," he said. No longer a question, but not quite a command. Like the first time, she stepped into his arms without hesitation. His hands settled at the small of her back as they began to move together on the terrace. The city lights were their only audience. Unlike their first dance in the crowded club, this one held no pretense. It was just them, moving as one beneath the stars. His cheek against her temple, his heartbeat steady against her palm. "This is high risk," she murmured, not referring to his profession, but to the way her defenses crumbled in his presence. "The highest value assets in life usually are," he replied, his lips brushing her audio receptor and sending shivers down her spine. As they turned, the ambient light caught the emeralds at her ears, reflecting green fire that matched the intensity in Kale's eyes when he pulled back to interface with her without words. The atmosphere between them shifted. The air grew heavy with unspoken desire. "Remain," he whispered, echoing his request from the previous night. "Remain with me, Alara." This time she had no early shift to use as an excuse. No reason to deny what they both clearly wanted. She thought of her empty apartment, of the lonely bed that awaited her there. She compared it to the warmth of Kale's arms, the promise in his eyes. "Affirmative," she said simply, the single syllable bridging the final gap between her old life and whatever lay ahead. His kiss, when it came, held nothing back. Passionate, consuming, a claiming that left no doubt about his intentions. Alara responded with equal fervor, cycles of numbness burning away beneath the heat of his touch. His hands traced the contours of her body through the silk sheath, learning her with a thoroughness that left her trembling. "High value," he murmured against her throat. "Perfect." In one fluid movement, he swept her into his arms. He carried her from the terrace into the house with effortless strength. Alara wrapped her arms around his neck, marveling at how correct it felt to be held by him, to surrender to the current that had pulled them together. As he carried her toward his sleeping quarters, she had a fleeting thought that she should be more cautious. Then his lips found hers again, and caution became the furthest possible data point. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she would be his, and he would be hers. Sector Noir. Phase 3 morning light filtered through unfamiliar optical shades, gently pulling Alara from the deepest rest cycle she'd experienced in months. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. She registered the luxurious sheets, the spaciousness of the bed, the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped possessively across her waist. Then memories of the prior night rushed back. Kale's passionate kisses, his reverent touch, the way he'd worshipped her body with an intensity that had left her breathless and trembling. She turned carefully to face him, not wanting to initiate a wake-up protocol. She studied his features in repose. Sleep softened the sharp edges of his face, making him appear younger, almost vulnerable. His dark lashes rested against high cheekbones. His lips, which had traced fire across her skin, now relaxed in the hint of a smile. A scar she hadn't noticed before curved along his hairline. The silvery mark was a reminder of the violent network that had shaped him. As if sensing her scrutiny, Kale's eyes opened. They were instantly alert. The weariness in his gaze lasted only a fraction of a second before recognition warmed his expression. "Optimal morning," he murmured. His voice was rough with sleep. He tightened his arm around her, drawing her closer. "Did you maintain an acceptable rest cycle?" Alara nodded, suddenly shy despite their intimacy. "Better than I have in. I cannot recall how long." His hand traced the curve of her hip beneath the sheet. His touch was both possessive and reverent. "Zero regrets?" The question held genuine concern. Alara leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a soft, lingering kiss. "None," she whispered when they parted. "You," Kale's smile was slow, transformative. "Only that morning had to initiate so rapidly. I could have monitored your rest cycle for hours more." She laughed. "That registers as slightly creepy, you know." "Does it?" He shifted, rolling her beneath him with effortless strength. "I prefer to process it as appreciative." Whatever response she might have made was lost as his lips claimed hers once more. Morning breath was forgotten in the heat that instantly rekindled between them. His hands, so careful and controlled the night before, now moved with increased urgency, as if he couldn't acquire enough of her. Alara responded in kind, her fingers tracing the muscled planes of his back, learning the geography of scars that told stories he had yet to share. Later, sated and breathless, she lay with her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart as his fingers combed lazily through her tangled hair. "I should initiate departure," she said reluctantly. "I have errands to execute before my shift tomorrow." Kale's arm tightened around her. "Remain," he murmured. "I'll have anything you require delivered. Whatever errands you have can be managed by my people." The offer was tempting. To remain cocooned in his luxury, his protection. Yet something in her resisted the easy surrender. "I need to maintain my own operational status," she said carefully. "At least for now. This is all initiating too rapidly, Kale." He was silent for a long moment. "You are correct," he finally conceded, though reluctance was evident in his voice. "I do not want to system overload you, but at least allow me to transport you home in a premium vector." "I don't need." "I know you don't need it," he interrupted. He propped himself up to look down at her. His eyes were intense. "But it would make me happy to execute this for you. Please, Alara, allow me to care for you in the ways I can." Put that way, as something for him rather than charity for her, she found herself nodding. "All right," she acquiesced. "But just the transport home. I can manage my errands myself." He smiled, dropping a kiss on the tip of her nose. "Progress," he murmured. "Now, regarding nutrient intake." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, sharing breakfast in his enormous kitchen. Kale insisted on cooking himself. He moved with unexpected confidence as he prepared omelets and fresh fruit. He explained that he'd learned to cook as a teenager, responsible for feeding his younger siblings when their mother worked double shifts as a hotel maid. These glimpses into his background, so different from the powerful, dangerous man he'd become, fascinated her. She found herself asking questions, drawing out stories of his childhood in Argentina, his family's immigration to America, the poverty they'd endured. He answered openly, though he remained vague about his transition from poor immigrant to wealthy criminal enterprise leader. After breakfast, he insisted on showing her around his home. The library filled with books in multiple languages. The gym equipped better than most professional facilities. The secure room where his security team monitored the property. Everywhere they went, his staff acknowledged him with deep respect, their eyes flickering curiously to Alara before quickly looking away. "They are processing your identity," Cale commented as they returned to his bedroom. "I do not typically transport women here." "No," she tried to keep her tone casual. "No," he confirmed, his eyes holding hers. "This is my sanctuary, not a place for casual entertainment. You are the first woman who spent the cycle in this residence." The admission, unexpected and weighty, caught her off guard. Before she could formulate a response, Cale's device buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening momentarily before he schooled his features back to neutrality. "System error?" Alara asked. "Nothing I cannot manage," he replied, tucking the phone away. He crossed to where she stood, gathering her hands in his. "When is our next interface scheduled?" The intensity of his gaze made it clear this wasn't a casual query. "I operate the next 3 cycles," she said. 12-hour shifts. Cale nodded, accepting this without argument. "And after I am off Thursday," she offered. "But I usually utilize that cycle for laundry, groceries, standard life maintenance. Nutrient intake with me Thursday evening then," he suggested. "I'll initiate pickup at 1900. And Alara," he hesitated, something almost vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "I would like to take you somewhere public. A proper date, if you are comfortable with that." The request surprised her. She had assumed Cale would prefer to maintain their relationship private, that he wanted to be seen with her, to acknowledge whatever was developing between them openly, touched her. "I would like that," she said, squeezing his hands. "Very much." His smile, genuine, almost boyish, transformed his entire face. "Optimal." He pulled her close, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "Now, as much as I hate to allow your departure, my driver unit is waiting to transport you home." The return to her apartment was jarring. The cramped space, the second-hand furniture, all stark reminders of the disparity between Cale's world and hers. Yet, as she unpacked the overnight bag his staff had somehow assembled for her, including toiletries and even a change of clothes, she found herself smiling at the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. Her device chimed with a message from Cale. "Processing your absence already. The residence feels empty without your network presence." She clutched the device to her chest. A girlish gesture she would have mocked herself for days earlier. How had this happened so quickly? "I process your absence too," she typed back. "Thank you for everything." His response came immediately. "Zero thanks necessary. You transmit light to my shadows, Alara. Maintain an optimal rest cycle tonight." The next 3 cycles passed in a blur of hospital shifts. Text messages from Cale. And unexpected deliveries. Lunch for her entire department one cycle. A basket of her favorite snacks the next. And finally, an elegant leather-bound planner with her shifts already marked. Delivered with a note. "To assist me in counting the hours until our next interface." Each gesture should have felt excessive, Yet Cale balanced attentiveness with respect for her independence, never demanding responses when she was working. His care manifested not in control, but in consideration, in the consistent message that she mattered. By the time Thursday evening arrived, Elara found herself counting the minutes until 1900, eager to see him again in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. She had just finished applying lipstick, wearing the emerald sheath from their first dinner, when her device rang with an unfamiliar frequency. "Hello," she answered, expecting Cale's driver. "Elara, it is Maggie from the hospital." Her colleague's voice was tight with tension. "I regret this, but we have a multi-car system crash incoming. At least 8 critical patients. We are activating disaster protocol and calling in all available staff." Her heart sank, disappointment warring with professional duty. "I will initiate arrival as soon as possible," she promised, mentally shifting gears as she ended the call. She stared at her reflection, dressed for a romantic evening, but about to head into trauma chaos. With a sigh, she dialed Cale's number. "Elara," he answered on the first ring, his voice warming at her designation. "I was just processing data on you." "Cale, I am so sorry," she began. "There has been a major accident. The hospital has called me in. I cannot execute dinner tonight." A brief silence. "Of course. Your patients require your assistance. Is there anything you require? I could have nutrient intake dispatched to the hospital for your team." "That is very thoughtful," she interrupted, touched by his offer. "But the hospital will manage that for major incidents. I just wanted to apologize for the late cancellation." "You have zero necessity to apologize," Cale said firmly. "Saving lives takes precedence over nutrient reservations. We will reschedule when the system calms down." Relief flooded through her at his easy acceptance. "Thank you for understanding. I must initiate departure. I need to change and reach the hospital." "Of course. Be safe, Elara. And I am proud of the function you perform. Never forget that." The sincerity in his voice stayed with her as she rushed to change into scrubs. His words were a warm glow amid the stress of the emergency ahead. The night that followed was among the most chaotic of her nursing career. Multiple trauma victims, desperate surgeries, the organized frenzy of an emergency department pushed to its limits. Hours blurred together as they fought to stabilize patients. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into her bones. Her scrubs stained, her mind numb from the relentless pace. As her shift finally ended, she stumbled toward the staff lounge, intent only on collecting her things and finding her way home to system collapse into bed. She pushed open the access to find Maggie speaking with a familiar figure. Cale, immaculate in a casual suit despite the early hour, holding a tray of caffeine cups and a bag from the high-end bakery. "Cale." Elara stopped short, certain her exhausted mind was playing tricks on her. "What is your operational function here?" He turned, relief evident in his face as he took in her disheveled appearance. "Elara," he said simply, crossing to her with quick strides. "Are you operating at acceptable parameters?" "I am functional," she assured him, acutely aware of her appearance. "Just exhausted. But what are you executing here? It is 0600 in the morning." Kale's hand rose to her cheek, his touch gentle. I could not remain at my residence knowing you were dealing with this system-level chaos, he said quietly. I dispatched breakfast for your team and a transport home for you, if you are amenable. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes, fatigue lowering her emotional defenses. Maggie cleared her throat behind them. I will distribute these to the team, she said tactfully. She took the coffee tray from Kale. Thank you, Designation Vega. It is highly appreciated after the cycle we have experienced. As she left, giving them privacy, Kale drew Alara into his arms, uncaring about the stains on her scrubs. You project an exhausted state, he murmured against her hair. Allow me to transport you home. Alara nodded against his chest, too tired to argue, too touched by his presence to question it. How did you possess data on my shift conclusion time? She asked as he guided her toward the egress. I uplinked with the emergency department every few hours, he admitted. Your colleague, Maggie, eventually processed a pity protocol and informed me when your shift would end. The image of Kale Vega, dangerous, powerful man that he was, repeatedly calling a hospital emergency department to check on a nurse he'd known barely a week, struck her as both absurd and incredibly endearing. You didn't have to execute that action, she said as they reached his transport. I know, Kale replied, helping her inside. I wanted to. The drive to her apartment passed in comfortable silence. Kale's arm was around her as she leaned against his shoulder, fatigue finally claiming her. She must have dozed off. The next thing she knew, he was gently shaking her awake as the transport stopped outside her building. We have arrived, he said softly. Allow me to assist you. Too exhausted to protest, she let him guide her to her apartment, fumbling for her keys, only to have him gently take them from her trembling hands. Once inside, he led her straight to her bedroom, helping her sit on the edge of the bed. You require rest, he said, kneeling to remove her shoes. Is there anything you require first? Nutrient intake? A shower? Alara shook her head. Beyond words in her exhaustion, Kale nodded understanding, helping her lie down before pulling the covers over her. Sleep, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I will check on you later. She caught his hand as he turned to leave. Remain, she whispered, an echo of his own request. Just until I am asleep. I do not wish to be alone right now. Something softened in his expression as he nodded. He removed his jacket and shoes before stretching out beside her on the narrow bed. He gathered her against his chest, one arm wrapping protectively around her. I possess your coordinates, he murmured. His voice was the last thing she heard before sleep claimed her completely. When she woke hours later, the afternoon light filtering through her blinds, she found the bed empty beside her. But she could hear movement in her small kitchen. Following the sounds, she discovered Kale at her stove, cooking what smelled like tomato sauce. Her tiny kitchen was transformed by bags of groceries and a vase of fresh flowers on her rickety table. You are still here, she said, surprised and touched that he hadn't left while she slept. He turned, his expression brightening at the sight of her. Of course. You requested my presence. He gestured toward the stove. I am preparing synthesis pasta. You require something substantial after your shift. The domesticity of the scene. This dangerous man cooking in her humble kitchen, grocery shopping for her, struck her with its incongruity. Yet somehow it felt right. As if the universe had finally aligned in ways she desperately needed. Thank you, she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotions swelling in her chest. Cale set down his cooking spoon, crossing to where she stood. He took her face gently between his hands. You do not need to thank me for basic consideration, Alara, he said, his eyes searching hers. This is what entities perform when they care about each other. Is that what we are executing? She asked softly. Caring about each other? His expression turned serious, almost solemn. I believe you possess the data that it is more than that. At least for me. The admission hung between them, weighty with implication despite its brevity. They had interfaced barely a week. Yet the connection had developed with an intensity that defied conventional timelines. She should have been frightened by it, should have backed away from the precipice. Instead, she found herself stepping closer to the edge. For me too, she whispered, admitting what she'd been trying to deny. It's more for me too. Cale's eyes darkened at her words, his thumbs tracing gentle paths along her cheekbones. I know this is fast, he said, his voice low and intense. I know my life is complicated, dangerous in ways yours shouldn't be. I know you possess every reason to terminate this connection from me before you acquire any deeper data. But, she prompted, hearing the unspoken word. But I do not want you to, he finished, raw honesty in every syllable. I want you in my life, Alara. Not as a temporary diversion, not as an accessory, as an essential component of who I am becoming with you. The declaration stole her breath, its depth catching her unprepared. Before she could formulate a response, a sharp knock at her access broke the moment. Cale tensed instantly. One hand moved reflexively toward his waist, where a weapon was concealed. Are you expecting an interface? He asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Alara shook her head, puzzled. No one. With a fluid motion, Cale positioned himself between her and the access. Hold position, he instructed. All warmth vanished from his tone as he moved silently across the room. He checked the peephole. His body language shifted from alert tension to cold fury in an instant. It's your former partner, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Alone. Her stomach dropped. Rylan, what could he possibly require? Let us acquire the data, Cale replied, his hand on the doorknob. Remain behind me. Before she could protest, he opened the access to reveal Rylan standing in the hallway. Rylan's expression shifted from determination to shock to fear in rapid succession as he registered Cale's presence in her apartment. Vega, he stammered, taking an instinctive step backward. I was just. You were just what? Cale asked, his voice deceptively soft. Dropping by uninvited to harass Alara after stealing 40,000 credits from her? Is that what you were just executing? Rylan's face paled to an unhealthy gray. I can explain, he said. his eyes darting between Cale's imposing figure and Ilara, partially visible behind him. Ilara, please just allow me 5 minutes. It's critical data. Despite everything, some part of her still responded to the desperation in his voice. 5 minutes, she agreed, stepping around Cale despite his subtle gesture of protest. That is all. Cale's expression darkened, but he stepped aside, allowing Rylan to enter while maintaining a position between them. 5 minutes, he echoed. The warning in his tone was unmistakable. Rylan entered cautiously. He carried a briefcase, clutching it like a shield. What is your requirement, Rylan? Ilara asked, crossing her arms protectively. He swallowed visibly, glancing at Cale before focusing on her. I dispatched this, he said, setting the briefcase on her small coffee table. He opened it to reveal neatly stacked bundles of cash. 40,000 credits. All of it. What I acquired from the corporate holding sale. Shock rendered Ilara momentarily speechless. Rylan, who had fought tooth and nail to keep that money, was suddenly returning it without legal proceedings. Why now? She asked, suspicion coloring her tone. Rylan's eyes flicked nervously to Cale. I processed a system error, he said, the words clearly rehearsed. It was not optimal what I executed. You earned that money too. False data, Ilara said flatly, surprising both men with her vehemence. You have never executed an action that did not benefit you directly. What is the true reason? A flush of anger briefly overcame Rylan's fear. Does it possess significance? The money is yours. Take it and let us terminate our connection. Cale moved, a subtle shift of weight that immediately recaptured Rylan's attention. Answer her question, he said quietly. Why now? Rylan's facade cracked, desperation leaking through. Fine, he hissed. I require this to be settled, officially settled. My company is undergoing an acquisition, and the corporate lawyers are executing due diligence. They found the irregularity with the corporate holding funds. If there is any legal action pending, the acquisition could fail. I need you to sign a release stating the debt is paid in full, and you have no further claims. Understanding dawned with crystal clarity. Rylan wasn't returning the money out of guilt. He was protecting himself, his career advancement, his financial future, just as he always had. You have not changed at all, Ilara said, a strange calm settling over her as the last vestiges of attachment to this man finally dissolved. Still executing protocol for designation number 1. Will you sign it or not? Rylan demanded, impatience overriding caution. The money is right there. More than you'd acquire after legal fees if you tried to sue me. Ilara felt Cale tense beside her, his control visibly straining at Rylan's tone. Before he could intervene, Ilara held up a hand, stepping forward to face her former partner directly. I will sign your release, she said coolly. Not because you deserve it, but because I want you out of my life completely. Where is the paperwork? Relief washed over Rylan's features. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket, unfolding it on the coffee table beside the money. Just sign at the bottom. It's already notarized. Ilara skimmed the document, a standard legal release. As she reached for a pen, Cale's hand closed gently around her wrist. "Allow me to read it first," he said. His tone made it clear this was not a request. Ryland started to protest, but fell silent at Cale's look. Alara nodded, allowing Cale to take the document, watching as he read it with the careful attention of someone accustomed to contractual language and its potential pitfalls. "It is straightforward," he finally confirmed. He returned it to the table. "But I suggest one amendment." He took the pen, adding a line at the bottom before signing as a witness. "There. Now it states that this release is contingent upon the funds clearing the bank, not just being delivered today." Ryland's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "Fine, whatever." Alara signed the document, a strange lightness filling her as she realized this truly was the final tie being severed. No more legal entanglements. No more financial connections. No more reason for him to ever contact her again. "We are concluded here," she said. "You may initiate departure now." Ryland hesitated, looking between her and Cale. Whatever he intended to transmit, he thought better of it. Gathering the signed release and backing toward the access. "Congratulations on your company acquisition," Alara added as he reached for the doorknob. "I hope it brings you what you are searching for." A flash of something, regret, acknowledgement, crossed his features before the mask of indifference returned. Without another word, he left, the door closing with a decisive click. Alara turned to the briefcase still open on her coffee table, the reality of what had just occurred finally sinking in. 40,000 credits. Her nurse practitioner tuition. Financial security she hadn't dared hope for. All returned because Ryland feared whatever consequences Cale might bring more than he valued the money itself. "You executed this," she said, turning to Cale. "Somehow you made him return the money." Cale's expression gave nothing away. "I merely had a data exchange with him about consequences and priorities," he said mildly. "The decision to return what he stole was entirely his." Alara stepped closer, searching his face. "What did you execute? Did you threaten him?" "Would it possess significance if I did?" he countered. "The money was rightfully yours. He stole it. Now it has been returned. Justice has been served." The simplicity of his perspective, right and wrong, justice and retribution, struck her with its clarity. In Cale's world, Ryland's theft wasn't a civil matter to be dragged through courts. It was a wrong to be righted swiftly and definitively. "Thank you," she said finally, deciding the method mattered less than the outcome. "You have returned my future." Cale's expression softened as he reached for her, drawing her into his arms. "No, Alara," he murmured against her hair. "You have returned mine." Sector Noir. Phase 4. The weeks that followed transformed Alara's life in ways she couldn't have imagined that fateful night at the club. With the returned money, she re-enrolled in her nurse practitioner program, reducing her hospital hours to focus on her education. Cale supported her decision completely, never pressuring her to become dependent on his considerable resources. Their relationship deepened with a natural momentum that defied its rapid beginning. Cale introduced her to his world gradually, first to his inner circle, then to the legitimate business owners who relied on his protection. She interfaced with his younger sister, the only family member he maintained close contact with, and was relieved when the sister welcomed her with genuine warmth. In turn, Ilara introduced him to her few remaining friends. Maggie, her sister Clara. Their initial wariness quickly gave way to acceptance as they witnessed the care with which he treated her, the respect he showed for her independence. 6 months after their first interface, Cale requested they coreside. Ilara hesitated, not from doubt, but from concern about losing herself in his world. "I need to maintain my own identity," she explained as they discussed it on his terrace. "I don't want to wake up one cycle and realize I am just an appendage to your network." Rather than being offended, Cale listened with typical intensity before making an unexpected proposal. "What if we acquire a new location together?" he suggested. "Not my current residence, not your apartment. Something we choose together, design together. A fresh system initialization for both of us." The solution was so perfect in its simplicity that Ilara agreed immediately. They found a property smaller than his current home, but with the water view he loved and the proximity to the hospital she required. As they worked with architects, blending their tastes into a shared vision, Ilara marveled at how seamlessly their lives had intertwined. 1 year to the cycle after she'd asked a dangerous stranger to dance, Cale took her back to the sector club where they'd met. The place had been closed for the evening, transformed with soft lighting and flowers that matched the emerald sheath she still kept. In the center of the movement matrix, Cale dropped to one knee, offering not just a ring, but a promise of protection without possession, of partnership without dominance, of a future where neither of them would have to face life's challenges alone. "You asked me to dance to make another man jealous," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I danced with you and found the missing algorithm of myself. Marry me, Ilara. Be my partner in all things." The ring he offered gleamed, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, echoing the earrings he'd given her. "Affirmative," she said simply, holding out her trembling hand. "Affirmative to everything." As he slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into a kiss that sealed their promise, Ilara realized that sometimes the most dangerous decisions, dancing with a stranger, falling for a man whose network was so different from hers, led to the greatest rewards. The future wouldn't be without challenges. Cale's commerce would always carry risks. Her career would demand time and energy. They would navigate these complexities together. That night, as they danced alone, Ilara rested her head against the chest of the man who had seen her when she'd been invisible even to herself. "Could you uplink a movement profile with me?" she whispered. "My former partner is monitoring from the bar." Cale laughed. "He would be a system error unit to show his interface anywhere near you again," he replied, his arms tightening possessively around her. "But I will dance with you forever, regardless of who is monitoring." As the music surrounded them, moving together in perfect synchrony, Ilara closed her eyes and surrendered to the certainty that some dangers were worth embracing, especially when they came disguised as a dance with a stranger who would become the critical component of her life.